This morning, October 19th, Russia woke up to something it had not seen in decades: open calls for President Vladimir Putin's resignation spreading across major cities. What began as scattered online appeals late last night has turned into a nationwide wave of discontent by midday. According to multiple independent sources, spontaneous gatherings have been reported in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Ekaterinburg, and Novosibirsk. Crowds are not large, but their tone is unprecedented. People are no longer demanding reform, they are demanding departure. The slogans are simple, direct, and dangerously unified: enough. Step down. We are tired. Officially, the Kremlin remains silent. State media avoid mentioning the protests, focusing instead on routine coverage of regional economic meetings. Yet, behind the scenes, something has clearly shifted. Our sources close to the presidential administration confirm that emergency consultations were held in the early morning hours. One insider described the atmosphere as disoriented and tense, with regional governors urgently contacting Moscow for instructions. Security services have been ordered to monitor public sentiment but avoid mass detentions, a sign that the government fears escalation more than it fears protest. What makes this moment particularly striking is the speed with which discontent has surfaced. For months, economic strain and quiet frustration simmered below the surface. Inflation, sanctions, military fatigue, all had created a slow-burning unease. But according to analysts, the immediate trigger came 2 days ago, when leaked documents allegedly revealed internal divisions within the government over the costs of continued militarization. The leak, dismissed officially as fabricated Western propaganda, seems to have hit a nerve. The idea that even within the Kremlin there are voices of doubt has given the public a rare sense of permission to speak. In Moscow, the atmosphere is surreal. The city center remains calm, traffic normal, police visible but restrained. Yet tension is palpable. People speak in hushed tones in cafes, watching live updates on their phones. In some neighborhoods, small groups have gathered, holding handwritten signs before being quietly dispersed. "We are not afraid anymore," one young woman told our correspondent before her voice was drowned out by car horns. "We just want to live normally." Analysts say what's happening cannot yet be called a revolution, but it might be the beginning of something that changes the rhythm of Russian politics entirely. "This isn't about ideology," says one political scientist. "It's about exhaustion, moral, social, psychological. When people stop believing in change, they start demanding an ending." Still, the government's silence is the most telling signal. No emergency addresses, no televised briefings, no arrests on a massive scale, at least, not yet. It's as if the Kremlin is waiting to understand whether this wave will fade on its own or grow into something uncontainable. But the quiet itself feels fragile, like the moment before a storm. And if history has taught Russia anything, it's that silence often breaks suddenly, and never gently. For now, the question is not whether people are protesting, but whether they will be heard. And the answer to that will determine whether this day becomes a footnote, or the beginning of a new chapter in Russian history. By midday, the picture has grown far more complex. What early reports described as isolated civic gatherings have now spread across nearly a dozen regions, each with its own rhythm and tone. In Moscow, demonstrators are standing silently near the Kremlin walls, holding blank sheets of paper, a gesture that has become symbolic in times of censorship. In St. Petersburg, people are walking in groups without banners, forming what observers call moving protests. And in Ekaterinburg, police have begun detaining those filming the crowds. According to several rights organizations, more than 600 people have already been taken into custody, yet even these numbers remain unconfirmed, as official channels stay completely silent. Government spokespeople continue to describe the situation as social noise amplified by external influence. But among insiders, the language is changing. One high-ranking source within the presidential administration privately admitted, "This is the first time we don't have a unified communication line. Everyone is waiting to see what Putin himself will say." Yet, as of this hour, the president has made no appearance. State television continues with regular programming, a strategy some analysts interpret as deliberate understatement, meant to avoid legitimizing the protests by acknowledging them. However, the cracks are visible. Videos circulating on social media show not just young activists, but older citizens, retirees, teachers, even factory workers, standing side by side. Their faces look calm, not defiant, which makes the image all the more powerful. "This isn't a rebellion," says one observer from Moscow. "It's a collective sigh." In the past, public anger erupted quickly and was just as quickly suppressed. This time, it feels slower, steadier, more deeply rooted. The trigger, experts say, was not political rhetoric but daily life. Rising food prices, electricity shortages in several regions, and delayed pensions have created an atmosphere of quiet despair. For months, people grumbled in private. Now, those murmurs have found a rhythm, and that rhythm sounds like dissent. Local administrations are struggling to respond. In some areas, officials have been ordered to hold public listening sessions, a euphemism for gathering information on potential organizers. Yet, ironically, these sessions have become focal points for anger, drawing more attention than any official announcement. Meanwhile, inside the corridors of power, conversations have turned from control to contingency. Sources close to the Security Council reveal that 2 emergency plans are being discussed, one focusing on reasserting order through targeted detentions, and another advocating managed dialogue with the population to defuse sentiment. The very existence of the second option signals uncertainty, something unthinkable just a year ago. There's fear, says a former Kremlin advisor. Not of revolution, but of losing the illusion of stability. Once that illusion cracks, everything changes. Abroad, the reaction has been cautious. Western officials are avoiding statements, unwilling to feed Moscow's narrative of foreign interference. However, major international outlets are already broadcasting images of the gatherings, calling them the most visible public dissent of the decade. In neighboring capitals, diplomats are reportedly receiving fragmented intelligence suggesting that elements within the Russian elite are urging political recalibration, diplomatic shorthand for change at the top. For ordinary Russians, though, the meaning is simpler. We just want an end to fear, says a middle-aged man in Nizhny Novgorod, his voice trembling. Everyone's tired, of prices, of lies, of waiting for something to improve. These words, quietly spoken, reveal the deeper truth. This isn't a movement organized online or financed from abroad. It's the slow awakening of a society that forgot what it means to demand accountability. Yet beneath the calm exterior, tension is mounting. The silence from the Kremlin cannot last forever. Either the president will speak, or the country will start speaking without him. And if that happens, even a single sentence could change the entire trajectory of this day. By this hour, the silence at the top has turned from strategy to liability. The Kremlin's refusal to comment is no longer being read as control, but as weakness. Inside Russia's political circles, unease is spreading faster than the protests themselves. According to sources familiar with internal briefings, several senior officials have already suggested that a public statement from the president is urgently required to stabilize sentiment. Yet Putin remains out of sight. No new photographs, no video appearances, no official travel schedule. The vacuum of visibility is feeding speculation that the leadership is either divided or paralyzed. Across Moscow, something unusual is unfolding. Government buildings are heavily guarded, but the streets surrounding them remain open. Police officers stand in small groups, watching without intervening. The restraint is striking, calculated, even. It's like they've been told to wait, says a local journalist. To let the people speak first, to see what they really want. Whether this is a tactical pause or a symptom of confusion is unclear. But in Russia's political language, hesitation often signals something much larger, a change of tone, or perhaps, of balance. At the same time, a quiet shift seems to be taking place inside the state apparatus itself. Our sources in the Duma report that several deputies, known for their loyalty, have privately begun discussing transitional mechanisms, coded language referring to the possibility of political reform or even leadership transition. These conversations are whispered, not declared, but their mere existence marks a turning point. No one dares to say the word resignation, one insider said, but everyone is already speaking as if it's on the table. In the regions, the picture is uneven. In some cities, demonstrations continue peacefully, in others, local authorities have begun detentions, though cautiously. Regional governors are caught between two fears, the fear of overreaction, which could ignite public anger, and the fear of passivity, which could be seen as disloyalty to Moscow. Nobody knows which order will come next, a source in one southern administration admitted. And so everyone is improvising. The chain of command, once the backbone of Russia's stability, now looks fragmented, its links strained under the weight of uncertainty. Economically, pressure is mounting. The ruble has slipped for the third consecutive day, and foreign investors are reportedly freezing transactions until the situation becomes clearer. Russian state media attribute this to temporary volatility, but even within government-controlled outlets, editors are quietly requesting guidance, unsure of what line to follow. For a system built on vertical coordination, this loss of narrative coherence is dangerous. When everyone waits for direction and no direction comes, a veteran political observer noted, that's when systems begin to wobble. Abroad, analysts are watching with growing fascination. Intelligence reports circulating in European capitals describe a significant domestic confidence deficit inside the Russian elite. The term sounds technical, but its meaning is simple: people in power are beginning to doubt the permanence of power itself. In Washington, officials remain cautious, refusing to comment publicly, while quietly preparing for a scenario of accelerated internal change. No one is predicting collapse, but everyone senses movement. On social media, the tone is shifting from fear to focus. Posts once whispered are now written openly. This is not about courage anymore, one viral message reads. It's about reality. Across Telegram channels, a phrase keeps repeating: if not now, when? That question, short, defiant, almost rhetorical, has become a rallying point, a signal that resignation is no longer an abstract idea but a visible demand. Still, the atmosphere remains oddly calm. There are no riots, no barricades, no violent clashes. Just the steady hum of quiet defiance spreading through offices, schools, and homes. People are not shouting, they are waiting. Waiting for confirmation, for clarity, for someone at the top to acknowledge what everyone at the bottom already knows, that something fundamental has changed. And yet, amid this quiet, the most unsettling thought begins to emerge: what if no one speaks at all? What if silence itself has become the final act of power? The day moves forward, but the question lingers like static in the air: is this the beginning of an end, or the end of something that already began long ago? By the afternoon of October 19th, Russia finds itself suspended in a rare and fragile moment, a pause between loyalty and loss of control. Officially, nothing has changed. The president remains in power, the government continues to function, and the machinery of the state still grinds on. But beneath the surface, the structure that once seemed immovable is beginning to creak. Conversations that were once whispered only behind closed doors are now spreading through corridors of power, boardrooms, and even state media offices. Words like succession, transition, and future management are no longer forbidden. They are being uttered cautiously, but they are being uttered. And that alone signals the kind of shift that Russia's system was built to prevent. Our sources inside the presidential administration describe the mood as one of unspoken panic. Not loud, not chaotic, but pervasive. Mid-level officials are reportedly asking for written confirmations of orders, fearing that verbal instructions could later be disavowed. Several regional governors have requested direct reassurances that the Kremlin remains stable, a phrase that, according to insiders, is being repeated in internal correspondence with unusual frequency. It's not rebellion, says one longtime civil servant. It's something quieter: loss of faith. And that, in this system, is far more dangerous than dissent. In Moscow, the atmosphere has grown heavy, electric, yet eerily civil. Thousands of people move through city squares without chanting, without confrontation. They simply walk, as if marking territory through presence alone. Some carry flowers, others hold signs that read, "We just want change." At one spontaneous gathering near Pushkin Square, participants sang softly, not an anthem, but a lullaby. A police officer watching nearby reportedly removed his cap and stood still. "You could feel it," a witness said. Nobody wanted to fight. Everyone just wanted to breathe. State television continues to ignore these scenes, though cracks are showing there too. According to several editors, internal instructions arrived this morning, ordering the removal of any content that could be interpreted as commentary on domestic stability. One producer resigned live on air after refusing to cut a segment about the protests, an incident quickly scrubbed from archives but impossible to erase from the collective memory of those who saw it. For a media landscape designed to maintain one voice, even a single act of disobedience sounds deafening. Economically, signs of stress are multiplying. The ruble's fall has accelerated, and investors are quietly shifting assets abroad despite capital restrictions. State banks report an increase in cash withdrawals, particularly among small businesses fearful of sudden regulations. It's not panic yet, says one financial analyst, but it's the precursor to panic: uncertainty. The Ministry of Finance has issued a brief statement assuring full stability of financial operations, but the markets responded with silence, not trust. Meanwhile, international reactions have turned from observation to calculation. In Brussels, emergency meetings are being held to assess the political durability of Russia's leadership. Western diplomats are careful not to predict collapse, but their language has changed. The once frequent phrase, long-term leadership stability, has quietly disappeared from reports. In Beijing, officials express hope for internal balance, a phrase that, according to sinologists, often signals preparation for adaptation to a new political reality. Even in neighboring capitals like Minsk and Astana, leaderships are holding back public comments, waiting to see which direction Moscow will turn. Inside Russia's elite, two camps are forming, those who insist on loyalty and those who quietly prepare for what they call post-vertical governance. The first group, largely composed of security officials, argues that any sign of compromise would invite chaos. The second, including technocrats and regional administrators, believes that maintaining silence will only accelerate the collapse. It's like standing on a frozen river, one insider explains. You can stay still and hope the ice holds, or you can start moving and pray it doesn't crack beneath you. On the streets, that metaphor feels literal. People move cautiously, as if testing the limits of what's allowed. Police appear uncertain, sometimes stepping forward, then back again. The rhythm of the protests is strangely synchronized with the rhythm of the state itself, both moving, hesitating, then holding still. In this fragile balance, even small gestures carry enormous meaning. A retired colonel in Moscow was filmed saluting a group of young protesters as they passed. In St. Petersburg, a priest opened a church door and invited demonstrators inside to rest. These quiet acts of humanity, though small, are spreading faster than any official narrative. And yet, the most unsettling aspect of this day is not what is seen, but what remains hidden. Where is the president? Why hasn't he spoken? According to several sources, Putin is currently at his residence outside Moscow, in close consultation with security advisors. Some suggest that he is preparing a televised address, others believe he is waiting for the protests to exhaust themselves before appearing as the restorer of order. He has built his entire career on the illusion of control, says a political analyst. But illusions require performance, and right now, the stage is empty. The absence has become its own kind of message. It tells Russians that even the center of power is uncertain, perhaps even afraid. And that fear, quiet, shapeless, contagious, is spreading downward. As the day continues, one question echoes through both the streets and the corridors of authority: can a system built on obedience survive the moment when obedience begins to fade? The answer may come soon. Or it may come too late. For now, all that holds the country together is inertia, the habit of silence, the memory of fear, and the hope that someone, somewhere, still knows what to do. But as the sun sets over Moscow, even that habit seems to be losing its grip. The calm is no longer reassuring. It feels like waiting for something that has already started. By the evening of October 19th, Russia stands at a threshold it can no longer ignore. What began in whispers has become a chorus, and though the streets are still calm, the country itself is vibrating with something deeper than protest, a collective realization that the silence from above may no longer hold power. In Moscow, the air feels dense, electric, as if the city itself is holding its breath. People are still walking quietly through squares and boulevards, but there is a new undertone, not fear, not anger, but an unfamiliar kind of certainty. Something irreversible has begun, and everyone knows it. Inside the Kremlin, the lights remain on deep into the night. According to multiple sources, an emergency session of the Security Council was convened hours ago, stretching into an uneasy impasse. Senior figures, once publicly united, are reportedly split over how to respond. Some demand decisive action, a televised address, a show of authority, perhaps even arrests. Others warn that any harsh move could ignite the very chaos they fear. One insider describes the atmosphere as a room full of people looking at each other and realizing no one knows what to do. Even the most loyal advisors, sources say, now speak in conditional tones, not if the situation escalates, but when. At the same time, the machinery of state propaganda is faltering. For years, television defined reality. Tonight, it lags behind it. Regional channels quietly omit central directives, focusing instead on local issues. Some broadcasters have begun playing classical music during scheduled news slots, citing technical maintenance. Online, new hashtags trend hourly: #enough, #resign, #Russia deserves better, each emerging faster than it can be erased. Censorship, the government's oldest tool, suddenly feels outdated in a country where the truth now travels faster than control. Economically, the impact is immediate. Investors are pulling back, the ruble continues to slide, and several major corporations have reportedly suspended operations, pending political clarity. The central bank has issued a late-evening statement denying rumors of emergency capital restrictions, an announcement that only fueled speculation that such measures are being prepared. Markets are emotional, said one Russian economist in a carefully worded interview, but people are emotional too, and once both lose confidence, no decree can bring it back. On the streets, there are still no barricades, no violence, no grand slogans. Just small groups, standing in quiet defiance under the cold October sky. People bring tea, bread, candles. Some cry openly. Others simply watch in silence, as if bearing witness to something they never thought they'd see in their lifetime. Police remain nearby, but the confrontations are minimal. A strange, almost respectful distance separates them from the protesters. One officer was overheard telling a colleague, "Let them stand. They're standing for all of us." Such moments, invisible to official history, often mark the turning points that history later remembers. Internationally, governments are watching with cautious fascination. In Washington, officials have held a series of emergency briefings but have declined public comment. In Brussels, diplomats are reportedly drafting contingency plans for the event of leadership transition in Russia. Beijing's statement, brief and precise, reads, "China respects the sovereignty of the Russian Federation and hopes for national stability." Between the lines, analysts see a signal, not of loyalty, but of preparation for whatever comes next. Even in allied capitals like Minsk and Belgrade, the tone has shifted from solidarity to silence. No one wants to tie their future to uncertainty. Inside Russia's ruling elite, fragmentation is now visible. Several members of the business and administrative class have reportedly left the country in the past 24 hours. Others, fearing the appearance of disloyalty, are making public declarations of loyalty, too loud, too rehearsed, betraying anxiety rather than conviction. "You can feel the air changing," says one former official. They're not defending Putin anymore. They're defending themselves. Meanwhile, the streets of Moscow are illuminated by something that feels both fragile and momentous, candlelight vigils appearing in front of administrative buildings. People light small flames, not in anger, but as a quiet symbol of endurance. No chants, no speeches, just the flicker of light reflected in cold autumn air. "This isn't the end of the state," says a young student holding a candle near Red Square. "It's the end of pretending that nothing can change." By late evening, rumors spread that a presidential address is being prepared for the morning. Some believe Putin will announce a temporary withdrawal for health reasons. Others insist he will call for national consolidation and blame unrest on foreign manipulation. Whatever the message, one thing is certain: for the first time in his long rule, the country is no longer waiting to be told what to think. It is thinking on its own. Across social networks, one phrase begins to appear again and again: Russia is waking up. It is not shouted, not celebrated, just stated as fact. After decades of controlled stability, this quiet awakening feels both dangerous and inevitable. It does not yet have leaders, nor a clear direction, but it has something far more powerful: the sense that fear is losing its authority. And so, as October 19th draws to a close, Russia stands in silence once again, but this time, it is not the silence of obedience. It is the silence before transformation. A silence heavy with the weight of history, of choices postponed too long, of a future that suddenly feels closer than anyone expected. Whether this becomes the night before renewal or the night before repression, no one yet knows. But one truth has already surfaced, clear and irreversible: the age of unquestioned power in Russia has begun to crack. And once a wall begins to crack, it never stays standing the same way again.